Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your home for everything that goes bump in the dark and your fan-submitted stories told right here. I'm Gideon, your guide through the eerie and unexplained, and tonight we have a chilling tale from Joeanna titled My Cousin. Trust me, you're going to want to keep the lights on for this one, but before we dive in, make sure to visit paranormalnightshift.com to grab your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first ebook in our thrilling paranormal time travel series. If you love ghostly mysteries and adventures beyond the veil, you won't want to miss it. Now, settle in, because this story, well, it might just hit closer to home than you'd expect. I was about 11 years old, living in an older home in Detroit, Michigan. It was one of those houses with character, creaky floors, drafty windows, and a sense of age that hung in the air like a heavy curtain. My two sisters and I shared a massive upstairs bedroom. It wasn't the coziest, but it was our space, and we made it work. That night, my mum and aunt were getting ready for a night out, so we had a few younger cousins over to play. The bedroom was alive with laughter and chatter as we played games and tried to keep ourselves entertained. Outside, the world was blanketed in snow, the kind that makes everything seem still and silent. At some point, I wandered over to the window, curious about the snowy roof that extended just below. Something odd caught my eye. Footprints. They weren't human footprints, though. They were tiny, like doll shoes had made them, dotting the snow-covered roof in an eerily deliberate pattern. I called over my youngest cousin to show him, a mix of fascination and unease bubbling up in my chest. "Look," I said, pointing at the tracks. He peered out the window, his small face scrunching up in confusion. "That's weird," he mumbled. Before I could respond, something happened that I'll never forget. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a dark shadow standing near the far corner of the room. It was tall and featureless, its edges almost liquid as it shifted slightly, like it was part of the darkness itself. And then, it moved. It walked toward us, gliding as if there were no wall in its way, entering the room like it had every right to be there. My cousin and I froze, our eyes locked on the figure. I could feel the blood draining from my face, my legs rooted to the floor. What is that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Before I could process what was happening, my cousin looked up at the shadow's face, or where a face should have been. His eyes widened in terror, and he let out the most blood-curdling scream I'd ever heard. It wasn't the cry of a child who'd fallen or been startled. It was raw, primal, filled with a fear I couldn't comprehend. The shadow disappeared in an instant, but my cousin kept screaming. He stumbled backward, clutching his head, tears streaming down his face. "The wall!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "There are faces in the wall! I can see them! It's a demon! It's standing right there!" I turned to look, but I saw nothing. The room was just as it had been moments before, except for the chill that seemed to have settled over everything. My mom and aunt came running up the stairs, panic etched on their faces. They must have thought one of us had been hurt. As they burst into the room, my cousin's screams abruptly stopped. The silence was almost as terrifying as the screams had been. We all turned to him. He stood there, motionless, his face pale and his eyes glassy. Then, without warning, his body convulsed violently. He collapsed to the floor, his limbs jerking uncontrollably. We screamed for help, and my mum frantically called for an ambulance. The paramedics arrived quickly, whisking him away to the hospital. I was left standing in that room, trying to piece together what had just happened. When I saw him again at the hospital, he seemed fine, physically at least. But his eyes held a haunted look, like he'd seen something no one should ever see. Tentatively, I asked him what had happened. His answer shook me to my core. "I spoke to the devil," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stared at him, my mind racing. What did he say?" My cousin looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "He said a demon lives inside me now." That was all he said. No elaboration, no explanation. I wanted to press him, to ask more questions, but I couldn't find the words. I was too scared of the answers. As the years passed, that night faded into a dark corner of my memory, though it never fully left me. My cousin, however, was never the same. He became troubled, falling into a life of chaos and bad decisions. He was angry, reckless and distant, as if something inside him was broken, or worse, something was controlling him. One day, when we were in our mid-20s, he brought it up again. Out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you remember the night the demon possessed me?" I froze. I hadn't thought about it in years, but the memories came rushing back like a flood. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "It's still with me," he said matter-of-factly. "I can feel it. It's why my life's been the way it is." His words left me speechless. There was no doubt in his voice, no hesitation. He truly believed that whatever had entered the room that night had never left him. To this day, I don't know what we saw or experienced in that room. I don't know if my cousin's struggles are the result of that night, or if the entity was a manifestation of something deeper. All I know is that the memory of that shadow, those tiny footprints on the roof, and my cousin's haunted screams still sends chills down my spine. I haven't spoken to him in years, but sometimes late at night I think about what he said, about the demon he claims lives inside him, and I wonder if it's true, or if the darkness of that night has simply cast a shadow too long to escape. And with that, Joeanna, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And remember, if you have a story you'd like to submit, you can do so right here at paranormalnightshift.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now, if you enjoy the show and want to support it, consider joining us on Patreon. You'll get an ad-free experience, access to episodes a week early, and exclusive entry into all future journeys of the Dimensional Desperado ebook series. But hey, if Patreon's not your thing, no worries. You can still support us by subscribing to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube. And while you're there, leave us a comment and let us know what you think about this episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget, head over to paranormalnightshift.com to grab your free copy of the first ebook in the Dimensional Desperado series, The Birth of Dimensional Desperado. That's paranormalnightshift.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Paranormal Night Shift.